Hello and welcome to this tutorial where I'll be showing you how to create your contour line self-portrait but digitally. So the first thing you're going to do is open up Photoshop, and then you're going to go to File, Open, and you will open up your original photo, the self-portrait photo of yourself. You can use the same photo that you used in the acetate tracing, only because it's now a photo that you are familiar with and you kind of will be able to do the tracing a little bit faster in this way. So you're going to see it pop up in your layers dialog box after you select it, File, Open, select on your image. And what you're going to do here is just take a look at your screen. So right now you've got layers on the bottom right side. On the left side you've got tools. And we're going to be using pretty simple tools for this. The first thing I would like you to do is, you can see there the tab, the adjustments layer. And I've selected on levels, which is the second adjustment up on that screen right there under adjustments. And all this is doing, my levels, as you can see, it's popped up as a new adjustment layer. All it's going to do is now I can adjust contrast a little bit. So I've adjusted that to bring out the highlights and the shadows. And my next step is going to now add a new layer. So you can go to Layer New up at the top, or you can see that little symbol at the bottom right corner under your layer dialog box that has a plus sign. You can add a new layer that way. I just double clicked on the name Layer 1 and I double clicked it so I could rename it to Tracing. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm picking the color, and in order for me to see my outlines really well, I actually selected red as the color on my brush. So you can see that I've got red on the foreground there, and then I'm going to select on my brush tool. Okay, and my brush tool, I'm going to make sure it's on hard round. So at the top, like once I select on a tool, I'll see options at the top. And I'm going to make that size a little bigger just because I don't want this to be too refined and fine of a line. In my contour line, I kind of want my line to be a little fatter. So I am making the size, I think 17 pixels is what I selected, but you could even go up to 20. You know, play around with the size that works with your photograph. It's going to be different depending on the resolution of your photo and the size of your photo. So play around with the size of your brush. Now all I'm doing is literally going around and outlining all the values on my face. Okay, and I'm using the brush tool, just my trackpad, and I'm just trying to do a decent job here. It's not going to look amazing because we're not using a stylus. We are using a trackpad and our own fingers. So all I'm doing is just trying to go around, and I have this set on slow speed, hence that's why I'm tracing it very slowly. So I'm just outlining all the lightest values, and I'm just sort of like looking for kind of the lightest value on my face right here and trying to outline it. You feel free to do a rougher job on this. Like you don't, you can kind of outline your values a little more roughly. You don't have to go very detailed with how you outline your values. So it's really up to you. Okay. So at this point, you are doing all this on a new layer, correct? So make sure that when you take a look at your layers that you have a separate layer that you're doing the tracing on. This is very important because we want to make sure that this is going to be separate from the actual photograph. This is just an easy way to do it. So now I've sped up the video a little bit, so I'm just going to go through tracing out my face. I ended up spending time on it, but like I said, if you want to do this a little rougher and faster, that's perfectly fine. This is really a chance for you to do a contour line portrait of your face, a face that you've already done, so you kind of know where those values are a little better than another new photo. And eventually we're going to be adding in colors, okay? So this is how we're sort of adding another layer of our planning of our portrait to really think about the colors that we want to use. So you can see here I'm just going through, outlining everything on my face, and just really try to be careful that your shapes are enclosed, okay? This is going to help when you start dropping in color. And of course, if you find later on that your shapes are not enclosed because the color bleeds through the shape, you can definitely go back and fix it. It's no big deal. But as you're doing this, think about how you can make sure those shapes are enclosed, as it just makes this step so much easier. So I'm just about finished, just kind of adding in the last values. Mine, like I said, mine has quite a bit of detail, and I'm not expecting you to have as much detail on this one because it's really more of a color exploration within the shapes. Okay, so just about finished. And so now if I hide my photograph layer, you will see that, you'll see my tracing all by itself. And so I've created a new layer, okay? So you can see that I've created a brand new layer. And what I'm gonna do is add white in that background layer. And all it does is it gives me a chance to really see my tracing well, okay? And please keep in mind all of those layers can be moved around. And so I did go to my quick selection tool. And I selected one of the red lines in my tracing, okay? And then I went up to select similar right at the top. And then I ended up using the Paintbucket tool, as you can see over there, and dropped in black. So what this did was it selected all my red lines, and I was able to change my selection color of my red outline, my red contour lines, and drop in black instead, okay? So this is gonna just allow me now to work with just a black outline. And of course you can work with a different color outline. You could make that outline dark blue. You could make it, maybe you like red. Maybe you want it to be white. Obviously, if you want a white outline, you're gonna have to have a different colored background because you won't see white on white. It'll just be invisible. So now I made a duplicate layer once I changed it into black. So you can do that by two-finger clicking on the layer and then selecting duplicate layer. And now what I'm gonna do is actually, I'm ready to start dropping in color. And before I do that, actually, I'm going through my portrait, zooming in, Command plus to zoom in on a Mac. So I'm zooming in and I'm looking for any holes in my shapes. If I can find any holes, that's basically, it means that the color is gonna go through. So I'm just closing up any of those holes to ensure that I have shapes, okay? And on my copy, I'm gonna add color. So now you can see on my layer, I've made a copy of my tracing layer, and now I'm gonna add color in one of those layers. And I really like to just keep one of those layers just free of color so I can add color in later. So always remember to add a duplicate layer. Okay, so now what I did was I went File Open, and I opened up that monochromatic painting, right, that we looked at class today. And I'm using the Eyedropper tool. You can see right there the Eyedropper tool and the Paintbucket tool. These are the two that I'm using, okay? So the Eyedropper tool allows me to choose colors that I can see in the portrait, in the painting, right, where I see that monochromatic or more analogous color scheme right over there. So notice there's the eyedropper tool. It kind of looks like an eyedropper. And I'm selecting on the color, and you'll see that it pops up in the foreground color, right? And then I'm going back to my portrait because you'll have the tabs at the top there, and I'm dropping it into the shape. Now, you can spend some time kind of correlating, like, oh, my shadow's on this side of the face, so maybe I'll put a darker color on that side. Or, oh, I added color into my highlight area. Maybe I'll make that a lighter color eventually. So you can spend time just going back and forth to maybe your model image where you really like the colors used in that painting, and just use that eyedropper tool and select the colors that you want to try out, okay? So I'm going back and forth. Oh, I realized that I had a hole. So I went and I actually used my brush tool and I created a little line to separate that sort of hole between the two shapes. And now I'm going back in using my eyedropper tool, selecting on a color, and play around with the colors that you're choosing. And now I'm just dropping it in. I would say maybe don't use more than 5 colors. And when I say 5 colors, I also mean 5 values. So if you're doing this completely monochromatically, meaning you're using many different values of blue, just make sure that you use about 5 values. Like, don't use more than that. I'm just saying that it could, get a little complicated. I think if you stick with 5 colors or 5 values at this point, that you'll be good to go and you'll get enough variation of color. So here I am just going through, I just keep switching back and forth. And once you have the colors down on your actual tracing, you can actually use your eyedropper tool to get those colors. So you don't have to go back to that painting unless you're getting a new color. So here I am, and I'm just like dropping in a couple more colors to sort of finish it up. Yeah, really, just sort of trying to use a few different values here so it's not all the same value. And I did kind of look at my photo and say, oh, where are the highlights on my face? Where are the shadows? How can I sort of add in my colors and values to somewhat match up with my original photo? So here you go. This is what I created. And I did take a screenshot, Command-Shift-4, just to like record this color scheme that I tried out. And because you have a duplicate layer of your tracing, because you made a copy, in that copy, you can now create a new color scheme with another painting. So as long as everyone here gets to try out one color scheme at least, and if you are so inclined and now you know kind of how to do it with adding a new, painting, add it into Photoshop, file open, and then use the eyedropper tool and the Paintbucket tool to drop in some different colors, you can see how the color really changes the mood of the portrait. So please make sure that you save your work. So File, Save As. Make sure you name it correctly. So if it's a monochromatic color scheme, or you can just call it Contour Line Self-Portrait, and save it as a Photoshop file. Photoshop file is going to save all the different layers, and that's going to be helpful in case you ever want to revisit it. Okay, so that is basically the tutorial, and best of luck.